Welcome back, everyone. We are going deep today. Really deep. This time, we're taking a look at something most of us probably don't think much about. The stuff that happens on the ground before and after a flight. You know, all those airplane ground operations.
Right.
Our source for this deep dive is the FAA Airplane Flying Handbook. This is like the Bible for pilots.
It is. It really is.
So, it's going to be good. We're talking about the nitty-gritty details that make flying safe, stuff that even frequent flyers probably don't know.
Absolutely.
By the end of this, you'll have a whole new appreciation for all the work that goes into getting you from point A to point B safely. What's fascinating is this whole safety culture that starts even before the pilot gets to the plane, you know?
Yeah.
It's all about making sure the plane is airworthy.
Right.
I gotta admit, though, that word always sounds kind of, I don't know, boring to me. Like, it's just about paperwork.
Well, it is about paperwork, but it's way more than that. Think of it like this. Before you buy a used car, you want to check its maintenance history, right? Make sure it's been taken care of. Well, pilots do the same thing with planes. They check the logbooks. They're making sure that the aircraft has had all the necessary inspections, like the annual check, the 100-hour inspection, and so on.
Okay, so no skipping those checkups.
Definitely not.
What else are they looking for in those logbooks?
They're also looking for something called airworthiness directives.
Okay.
It's kind of like a safety recall for planes. So let's say you bought that used car and then you find out, oops, there's a recall for like a faulty airbag or something.
Yeah.
Airworthiness directives are like that.
So it's like making sure you don't have a faulty wing flap or something mid-flight.
Exactly.
That would be pretty bad.
You would not want that.
So after the paperwork, it's time to get hands-on, right?
Absolutely. The visual inspection.
This is where the pilot really has to, like, put their detective hat on, right?
That's a great way to put it.
I imagine they're looking for anything out of place, dents, misaligned parts, maybe fuel leaks, anything that just screams, hey, this isn't right.
Yep,
Wow.
that's part of it. But they're also looking deeper. It's about getting a feel for this particular aircraft, So even small things that are off will jump out at them.
So it's not just about the big, obvious stuff.
Not at all.
What are some of those less obvious things they're looking for?
For example, they'll check to make sure the seats are properly latched into the rails.
Okay.
I know it doesn't sound like a big deal, but in turbulence, a loose seat can be a dangerous projectile.
I never thought about that.
And then there are the windows. They need to be clean, of course.
Right.
But they also need to be free of cracks. And something called grazing.
Crazing.
It's like a network of tiny little cracks on the surface. And if the crazing is bad enough, it can refract light from the sun, make it hard to see out.
So like trying to see through a scratched up pair of sunglasses.
That's a good way to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And believe it or not, they even inspect the rivets.
Rivets.
Those tiny little metal fasteners that hold the plane together?
Oh, right.
They're looking for this black oxide film that forms around loose rivets.
So they really are like metal detectives.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got the logbooks, the super detailed visual inspection. What's next?
Well, next up is fuel.
Fuel. Of course, you can't fly without fuel.
Exactly.
But I'm guessing it's a bit more complicated than just filling up your car at the gas station.
Oh, yeah, it's a lot more involved. I mean, think about it. Getting the fuel right is critical.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine accidentally putting jet fuel in a car engine.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would be bad.
Disaster. So there are a lot of checks in place.
Uh-huh.
Different fuel types have different colors, so that's a big visual cue.
Got it.
But it goes even further than that. Pilots actually use their sense of smell to double check.
Wait a minute, they sniff the fuel.
Yeah, the sniff test. It's a
Yeah.
real thing. It's just another way to make sure the fuel supplier hasn't made a mistake.
That makes sense.
And they also check for water contamination.
Oh, right. Yeah, like you wouldn't want to drink from a water bottle with something floating in it.
Exactly. You need to make sure the fuel is pure.
Okay, so we've talked about the paperwork, the visual inspection, the fuel. What's next on our pre-flight checklist?
Now we're getting to the heart of the plane, the engine and propeller.
All right, let's start with the engine.
Okay, so they'll start by looking at the cowling. Those panels that cover the engine?
Yeah.
A lot of people think those are just for looks, to make the plane look sleek.
Right.
But they're really important for protecting the engine and directing airflow.
So a little chipped paint or a loose fastener could actually be a big deal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If a cowling panel came loose during flight, it could damage the engine or even other parts of the plane.
Oh, wow.
So pilots are looking for anything that could indicate a problem.
Yeah.
Chipped paint, missing rivets, that black oxide we talked about earlier.
Yeah. I'm starting to get the sense that In aviation, even small things can have big consequences.
That's exactly right. Now, moving on to the propeller.
Those nicks and dings you sometimes see on propellers, those aren't just cosmetic, are they?
Nope. Even a small nick or dent can be a problem. It creates a stress point, which can lead to a crack.
And I guess during flight, those cracks could get worse.
Exactly. And potentially cause the propeller to fail.
So a little ding could bring down a plane.
It's a scary thought. And here's another one. Even a little bit of ice in the propeller spinner.
Propeller spinner.
That cone-shaped part in the center. Even a little ice there can create vibrations. And those vibrations can damage the propeller.
I had no idea so many things could affect a propeller, so what's next?
Well, let's take a step back in time and talk about hand propping.
Hand propping. Now that sounds like something out of an old movie. I thought most planes had electric starters these days.
Most do, but some older aircraft, especially smaller ones, still rely on hand propping. It really shows why ground operations require so much skill and attention to detail.
So how does it work? You just, like, grab the propeller and give it a yank?
No. It's much more controlled than that. It's a two-person job. One person's in front, ready to spin the prop. The other person's in the cockpit, controlling the brakes and ignition.
Okay.
And there are specific commands they use to make sure everyone's on the same page and, safe.
Uh-huh.
Like the person in front might shout, "Brakes and contact."
Brakes and contact.
And that means the brakes are set and the ignition's on.
Mm-hmm.
And then they use their palms to push the propeller blade down and get it spinning.
They use their palms. Why not just grab it?
Safety. If the engine backfires or kicks back, the propeller could spin the other way.
Ouch.
And if someone's fingers are wrapped around it.
Okay, I get it. Not good. It seems like everything in aviation is about minimizing risk and following procedures super carefully.
It absolutely is. And that mindset carries over to something as simple as moving the plane around on the ground.
You mean taxiing?
Exactly.
Well, that's got to be the easy part, right?
You might be surprised.
Oh, really?
We'll get into it next.
So taxiing, it's basically just driving the plane on the ground, right?
You could say that, but everything in aviation, it's a little more complicated than it looks.
Really?
Oh yeah, even something as seemingly simple as taxiing requires a pilot's full attention.
I guess there are those, bright yellow lines on the taxiways to guide you.
Yeah, but airports are busy places,
Yeah.
There are other planes moving around, ground vehicles, people.
Oh, yeah, true.
And then you have unexpected obstacles sometimes, like a luggage cart that's gone astray or something.
Okay, I see what you mean.
So situational awareness is really important when you're taxiing.
Makes sense. And I bet wind is a big factor too, right? Especially for those smaller planes.
Absolutely, wind can be a major challenge when you're taxiing, especially for lighter aircraft.
So how do pilots deal with that?
They actually use the plane's ailerons and elevators to counteract the wind.
Wait, the ailerons and elevators, aren't those for, turning and climbing?
They are, but they can also be used to control the plane on the ground.
So they're kind of flying the plane a little bit even when they're still on the ground?
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
They're using those control surfaces to keep the wings level and prevent the wind from pushing the plane around.
I never thought of that.
It's kind of like, imagine you're trying to walk across a windy parking lot with a big umbrella.
Okay, yeah.
To keep the umbrella from blowing away, you have to adjust your grip and lean into the wind right.
Uh-huh.
Well, pilots are doing something similar with the ailerons and elevators.
That's a really cool analogy.
It really is. And here's a surprising fact that a lot of people don't realize: taxiing too fast can actually damage the aircraft's tires.
Seriously, I always thought those tires were, super heavy duty, built to withstand just about anything.
They are durable, but if you taxi too fast, it generates heat.
And that heat can damage the tires.
Exactly. It can weaken them and potentially even cause a blowout.
So slow and steady wins the race when it comes to taxiing.
Absolutely. Safety first, even at low speeds.
Okay, so we've covered taxiing. Now what?
Well, once the plane is at the runway and ready for takeoff, there's another crucial step: the takeoff briefing.
A briefing? I thought all that stuff we talked about earlier, the pre-flight checks and procedures, wasn't that the briefing?
Those are all about getting the aircraft ready, but the takeoff briefing is about getting the pilot ready.
So like a mental prep.
Exactly. Think of it like athletes visualizing their performance before a big game.
So pilots are basically talking themselves through the takeoff.
More than just talking themselves through it, they're mentally rehearsing what they'll do in different scenarios, including emergencies.
Like what?
They'll go over things like the planned takeoff speed, the direction they'll turn after liftoff, and any special considerations based on the weather or the runway conditions.
So it's all about being prepared for anything.
Exactly. It's a proactive approach to safety, making sure the pilot is mentally sharp and ready for whatever comes their way.
Wow. It's incredible how much thought and preparation goes into every single stage of a flight.
It really is. And, that attention to detail doesn't end when the plane touches down on the runway.
Really?
Oh, yeah. There's still potential hazards even after a safe landing.
I would think that once the plane is back on the ground, the hard part is over.
It's easy to get complacent once you're back on solid ground, but complacency can be a real danger in aviation.
So what kind of hazards are we talking about here?
Well, for one thing, pilots have to stay focused until the plane is safely parked at the gate. I mean, there have been cases where pilots have accidentally retracted the landing gear instead of the slaps because they weren't paying attention.
They accidentally put the landing gear up after landing.
It happens, and it just highlights how important it is to stay focused even when you're tired after a long flight.
Wow, yeah, that's definitely a good reminder to stay sharp.
And then there's the whole process of securing the plane once it's parked.
There's a procedure for how to park a plane.
You bet. There are specific steps to make sure the plane is protected and ready for its next flight.
Like what?
Well, for example, they'll try to park the aircraft facing into the wind if possible.
Why is that?
It minimizes stress on the control surfaces. They also make sure the wheels are chocked so the plane doesn't roll. And they install control locks to prevent the rudder and other control surfaces from moving accidentally.
It seems like everything in aviation is about minimizing risk and being super careful.
It is, and that's what makes air travel so safe.
Well, I'm definitely feeling a lot more informed now.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. But we're not quite done yet.
Oh, there's more.
One more important aspect of ground operations, post-flight inspections.
So the checks don't even stop after the plane has landed and been parked.
Nope. Pilots perform another visual inspection after each flight.
Why is that necessary? I mean, didn't they already do a thorough check before takeoff?
They did, but things can happen during the flight,
Yeah.
So this is like a final check to catch any potential issues before they become big problems.
So what are they looking for during this post-flight inspection?
Things like fluid leaks, damage to the tires or landing gear, and any signs of wear and tear.
Wow, they really are thorough.
They have to be. Remember, safety is the top priority in aviation.
Well, after learning all this, I have a whole new appreciation for the work that goes into keeping us safe when we fly.
Me too. It's truly a team effort, and ground operations are a critical part of that team.
And on that note, I think we've successfully demystified the world of airplane ground operations.
I hope so. It's a fascinating world full of dedicated professionals who work tirelessly behind the scenes.
It's been an eye-opening deep dive for sure.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I hope our listeners did too.
I'm sure they did. So tell me what surprised you the most about all this. Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into a topic that might just change the way you see the world.
It really is amazing when you think about everything involved in, getting a plane up in the air and back down again safely.
It is. It is.
I mean, we've learned a lot in this deep dive.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of like all that behind-the-scenes stuff that happens in aviation.
Yeah, it's easy to kind of forget about all that ground stuff when you're, thinking about the excitement of actually flying.
Right.
But it really is so important. It's really the foundation for safe air travel.
Yeah, and what's really stood out to me is that it's not just about following checklists and routines.
No.
It's like a whole mindset.
Yeah.
This culture of safety that's like part of everything in aviation.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's all about thinking ahead,
Yeah.
anticipating problems,
Yeah.
paying attention to every little detail, never getting complacent. I gotta admit, before this deep dive, I probably would have been that person rolling their eyes when a flight got delayed,
Uh-huh.
thinking it was just another inconvenience. But now I get it.
Yeah.
Those delays, as annoying as they can be, they often mean that the pilots and ground crews are taking the time to get everything right.
Yeah.
Double checking every little thing.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, it's about keeping everyone on board safe.
Exactly. And those delays, even though they can be frustrating, they really are a sign that the system is working.
Yeah.
That safety is the top priority.
So next time I'm at the airport, I'm going to look at those ground crews with a whole new appreciation for what they do.
I hope so.
Yeah.
They really do deserve a lot of credit.
Knowing, all the expertise and dedication that goes into their work.
Absolutely. It's a lot more than people realize. I encourage everyone, next time you're at the airport, just take a minute. Observe the ground operations. See how they communicate.
Right.
The way they inspect the aircraft, how carefully they coordinate every movement.
It really is quite a process.
It is. It gives you a whole new understanding of what it takes to keep those planes flying safely.
Well, I think we've done a good job of, sort of demystifying this whole world of airplane ground
I
operations.
hope so. It's a fascinating world full of, a lot of dedicated people working behind the scenes.
Yeah. It's been a really interesting deep dive.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I hope our listeners did too.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. So I guess that about wraps it up for this deep dive.
It does.
Until next time, everyone, keep looking up.
And stay curious.